Hello, and welcome to Two Pews in a Pod. Join us as we explore faith in a modern world at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Now here are your hosts, Pastor Paul Baglios and Deacon Megan Wyant.
I'm Paul Baglios.
And I'm Megan Wyant.
Welcome again to Two Pews in a Pod, a podcast of Evangelical Lutheran Church. And we want to start this episode of this new series in our podcast with a shout out to Alice Fisher. Alice, you're going to be embarrassed and mortified to hear your name, to see this. But we're giving you a shout out because some weeks ago, when we were still planning for your ordination and installation here at Evangelical Lutheran Church, Alice Fisher, one of our dear members, a sister in Christ here in our congregation, had sent an email saying that she would really like to hear more about our stories on this podcast. So Alice, this series is for you. We'll call this the Alice Fisher series. We're going to spend 4 episodes talking about different issues related to our experience of call in ordained ministry. And in this first episode, we're going to talk about a difference of perspective. So as it happens, our anniversaries of ordination are just 2 days apart.
Right.
Megan was ordained on September 21st of this year here at Evangelical Lutheran Church. The ordination of the anniversary of my ordination, is September 23rd. But while those are only 2 days apart, they are 40 years apart.
Or a lifetime.
Or a lifetime. Right. Coincidentally, Megan's current age. My wife pointed out to me, so you were ordained the year Megan was born, which was inspiration for me that we would talk about the difference in perspective.
Yes.
Megan now serving in her first year of ordained ministry. I in my 41st year, September 23rd, 2024 being the 40th anniversary of ordination. I have very clear memories of different moments in my first year ordained as a minister of word and sacrament of the church. And a lot of those memories have to do with a sense of adjustment that felt profound and acute for me for the preceding years of college, years of seminary. I had been working toward ordination and call as a public minister in the church. And I remember in my first year experiencing, for myself at least, I'm not saying that this should be your experience, but almost a kind of disorientation that what I had so clearly in front of me for so many years, I had now reached that point of vocation, and now what?
Now what? Yeah.
The difference between preparing to be ordained and now being ordained. And I'm wondering,
oh my gosh.
While at this recording, we're not quite 2 weeks away.
I was going to say we're like 10 days
from your ordination. So with that depth of experience now under your belt, share with us what occurs to you to talk about now in your first year of what you also have spent quite a bit of time preparing for.
Right. Yeah. It's really honestly surreal to be at this point, 10 days in, having spent 3.5, almost 4 years preparing for the moment of ordination, really. And so to be in this first year, I think one of the things I'm reflecting on a lot is I'm already missing my learning. I'm already missing the classes and the goals and having that kind of behind me, pushing me to continue growth. And so one thing I'm already like stewing about is, without going into something too quickly, is how can I continue to learn and grow? Because I'm at my best when I'm doing that. I'm at my best when I'm in community with other people learning. and I want to bring my best to this call, this first call. And so I feel to do that, one of those things that is already at the back of my head is, oh gosh, I haven't been in class since May. There's so much left to learn. And I think I'm just very aware of that, this idea that there's so much left for me to learn. I thought at some point I would feel like an expert maybe, or at least sort of an expert by the time ordination came. And if anything, I feel like this is a beginning. I feel like I am 10 days into a first call, and that I am still, even after 13 years in ministry, doing youth and family ministry, that I still feel very new and very like a colt, a baby horse finding their feet.
I had similar experiences in my first year, and indeed all my years. I was grateful for the opportunity to learn that had come. And in my case, it was college immediately followed by seminary.
Right.
But I loved all the learning. Yeah. And once graduation was behind me, that too was a question for me. How will I continue to grow in learning, in understanding? In what ways will I do that? How will that happen? When will that happen?
Yeah.
I commend that in you, because I've also known too many leaders who once ordained, they're done reading serious things. They're done taking challenging classes that will really stretch them.
Yeah. I think it's this false narrative that we have of of achieving some kind of expert, right? To be the expert. Oh, I've done enough. I have this book read, this paper written, this title achieved. So now I am the expert. And I just feel like, as someone who I've always been very rooted in that idea of being a student. I loved my whole life being in school, and I love teaching, that there's always more. And so that curiosity is really what drives me forward to kind of keep pushing on those walls, because I've learned that the more I lean into that, just the more growth I have and the better for everybody.
I had also a similar sense once I was called and ordained, that the degrees that hung on my wall were not credentials of expertise.
Yes.
They were, in a sense, admittance to a life of learning, to continuing to grow in capacity, in ability.
And honestly, when you say that, it makes me, maybe it's because of the time of year and we're kicking off confirmation and all these programs, that this sense of beginnings is also how I felt when I was baptized as an adult. This isn't a culmination of you being ready and worthy. This is a starting point of something new, right? And as we're living into our lives after we're baptized, we're living into our lives, we're growing and learning. And there's something kind of beautifully biblical about it, that this too is a starting point. And a trajectory. And so we should continue onward and forward, and we're going to mess up, and that's okay.
We're going to talk about messing up in the third of these 4 planned episodes.
I'll tell you how terribly my first 2 weeks went. I messed up this, and I missed that, and I was late for this.
I have a very distinct memory within the constellation I was referring to before. It was one of my very first weeks after I had been called and ordained. I was serving as an assistant pastor to a congregation in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And one day, I was going to one of the local hospitals to visit one of our members. And I remember I pulled up into a parking spot in the parking deck, and before I got out of my car, I was overwhelmed with a profound sense of being on a threshold that I had not quite experienced in the same emotional way, that everything I've done so far is leading in a sense to this moment and to the other moments. But no longer was there in front of me a given plan.
Yes.
Do this, then do this, then do this. And appreciating for the first time that I would have to learn how to serve the call. to which I had been educated to say yes.
I think that's definitely the where I feel right now, is that sense of there's so many things I could be doing and directions I could be going, and it would be easy, I think, for me to fly off a handle in a way and just taking trails down who knows crazy paths. But really it's discernment and pacing too, which is part of because I am in my first call at the age of 40 and not a younger age like some clergy who go from college right into seminary. I have a first career. I have 13 years of ministry experience behind me. I've learned that lesson of listening and looking and pacing myself and knowing I don't have to rush into busyness or finding projects, but knowing that they will find me. And knowing that this Spirit will be giving me and guiding me into where we should go. So I'm trying to take my time while I'm really excited to get to work. Everybody kept saying, "Are you excited to be ordained?" No, I'm excited to get to work.
Yeah, I love that,
I'm
Megan.
not excited for just busyness for the sake of busyness. So really leaning into what does it mean to be a deacon here at Evangelical, and what does it mean to be a deacon for the whole church? Yeah. That's because I think of having some of the experience that I do have underneath me.
So we had some conversation before we began to record, and I had said that one of the things I wanted to mention now at the beginning of my 41st year as an ordained pastor, I very much think, in fact, I think I posted about this on the anniversary of my ordination. This is my 41st year of learning how to be a pastor.
Yeah.
And that's not just a question of what books am I reading or, what ways am I learning that might be connected to academic disciplines. It's learning how to be a pastor by learning ever more how to be with God's people.
Yeah.
And what it means to be called by a community of God's people for their sake, not for mine.
But in so much of that too is the self-work, though, is learning who you are as a leader and learning where your edges are, learning where your strengths are, and really working with those things. And that's a constantly evolving part of who we are as leaders, is learning who we are and what we need to do to be better. Yeah. And it's daunting. It can feel really daunting. It is.
For me, one of the key pieces of that learning, and this may sound so self-evident and obvious, but it's an elusive sense of the call to ministry leadership, is learning how to listen.
Yes. Yeah.
And that also means, I think, learning how to be curious, learning how to be genuinely interested in the stories, the perspectives, the witness of the people you're called to serve with and serve among. Not just to pretend that, and to listen to them in ways that you're hearing them tell you, this is how you serve this community.
Right.
Even if those aren't their words.
No, and I think that's been so much of my experience leading to now, is when we are in a community that I learned so much from our people, whether they are children and babies or mothers and teachers at the Wee Folk School or our elder members, everybody in between, that I'm learning from them. And it's from listening to their stories and holding space for their context and the lens to which they see the world. Because all of that is like a lens of God, right? If you're putting it all together kind of fractally, you have everybody's lens coming together. So we have to make room for that. Yeah.
I think you are very gifted at that already.
Oh, thank you.
Well before 10 days ago, I saw those gifts in how you served with and among the people of this congregation. And I've often thought that's a testimony not only to the gifts of your character, but the experience you bring to it as a teacher.
Probably, yes. And the love I've experienced here as a community of faith and of Christians is we are a part of this loving community who is ready and want to share their lives with us. And so what a blessing that is to be able to hear that. But yeah, I think having a grounding in teaching has been the best gift to ministry that I can have, is that I not only take to it and love teaching, but it has given me a skill set. And especially with my experience working with special education, a lot of that was in word ministry and pastoral care for families when you're helping them navigate the school system with a child with disabilities of some sort. Yeah.
So we didn't talk about this, but it's occurred to me. See if this is something you want to. See if this is one of those paths you want to take a few minutes walking down.
Sure.
It occurred to me that maybe I would offer, from now my sage vantage of 40 years, 4 decades, what would I most want to say to a colleague
I love that.
in a first year?
Yeah.
And what would you, as a colleague in a first year, most want to say to somebody who's been at this 4 decades?
Okay.
Does that work? Should we do
Sure,
that?
Leah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
You want to go first?
No, absolutely I don't.
Well, I'll go first and say, and this may sound like a cop-out because we've already talked about this a little bit, but I would want to say to any colleague serving in ministry, whether in a first year or a 51st year, learn the holy work of listening. Learn to listen with the ears of God.
I like that.
Before a word can come out of our mouths, and we are ordained to ministries of word in service, word in sacrament, but ministries of word, which means we are called to speak God's word as much as the Holy Spirit can equip any human being to do that, not just our own opinion. And I firmly believe that before our mouths can be instruments of God's grace and presence to human beings, our ears have to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say to you, mine's simple as well, though, is to remember to look at the work you do with fresh eyes, always. I think it's easy as you get comfortable in a setting or comfortable in a role to stagnate in a way or kind of live in this space of comfort. And so to remember to not just look at the work that you do with fresh eyes, but to be listening for fresh perspective, to be listening for new, because we know that God is always creating, that things are changing. And we talk about it all the time between us, that change is a part of our life. We have to embrace it and learn how to ride the waves. Otherwise, what's the alternative? Death.
Yep.
So that would be my advice or my thoughts to you. And I think you do this very well.
Well, that I'm going to say that's almost wise beyond your years, and it resonates with what I've experienced. I have served since my ordination in a variety of different settings, different calls, different roles. I came to ministry with the people of this congregation having done in different capacities 12 years as deployed staff of our denomination, and a number of different things before that. And I have had experiences of knowing when I'm getting stale.
Yeah.
Beginning to feel like I'm going through now well-tread paths that can almost become ruts.
Right.
And to keep one's perspective and therefore also one's enthusiasm fresh is part of the call.
Yes.
And here, I'm also now in a 4th year of ministry with this congregation, which has been just thrilling every day, every month of those years so far. There has not yet been enough time to begin to feel stale or stagnant, but I've learned enough to know that that time could come if I'm not alert to it and proactive.
I think something that happens is like anything that's rote, even the words we say within worship and liturgy can become there's a beauty to memorization, but can just become ordinary, right? So it's that remembering and not taking for granted those little things and moments. Like I'm always watching. I love when we in my head think of dress up the church, and we're putting paraments on or setting the table at the altar, and I just watch the movements and I think how beautiful they are, and I don't want to lose that sense of beauty in those simple things that we do. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's actually a good segue to what we'll talk about in our next episode.
Okay.
But we'll bring this particular conversation to a close for now.
Sure. I'm Megan Wyant.
And I'm Paul Baglios. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
As we move into the fall here at ELC, we're preparing for the wonder that is the upcoming Christmas season. With the busyness of this time of year, our episodes for Two Pews in a Pod will now be released on the first and third Monday of each month. We look forward to continuing our exploration of faith with all of you in the months to come. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.